Hey. Time for another Out of This World story from our space. Sometimes it is your circus and your monkeys. Today on our space, when you entertain a clown, don't be mad if they make you part of their circus. Caught my wife cheating with her ex-boyfriend, still competing with his son's mother. Last year, I did the hardest thing I could do, and that was divorcing my wife. I can't understand why she broke up our family, so maybe I'm trying to gain that here. I know my friends would say to just get over it, but it makes my head spin sometimes, I can't lie. My wife was messing around with her ex, even though she was better off by leaving him. I, male 34, met my wife, female 31, on the bus, going to work 7 years ago. She got on the bus 3 stops after me, and I would always stare at her. There are a few pretty girls that would get on the bus, but she was my favorite. One day, the bus driver had hopped out of the bus to go into a convenience store, and we just looked at each other and laughed. We talked about how weird that was, and we talked ever since. While we were riding the bus and talking, she would bring up her boyfriend, Keith, and always complain about him. She would always catch him cheating with the mother of his child, and he would deny it. His son's mother don't like her, so they never really got along, and it would cause them to always be separated. I really cared about her, so I would tell her to just leave since he was a clown, but she would still stay. I didn't know how to get her out of the dumb love triangle she was in. All that changed when my father gave me his SUV when he upgraded his car with no charge. This was great, and one of the first things I had wanted to do was take her up from the bus stop. When I had got the car, I started picking her up and taking her to work, something her ex didn't do. Even though she got to work earlier, she was happy then. I started taking her to other places just to hang out. We had so much in common, especially since she had family that lived in Guyana, where I grew up. After a while, I decided to shoot my shot and told her how I felt and that she should leave her boyfriend. She tried to give me a bunch of excuses, but failed to give me a good reason to stay with him. A few days later, she called me and told me she wanted to hang out for the weekend. When I picked her up, she told me she was done with him and his situation with his child's mother. After that, we were officially dating. We dated for about 3 years before we got married. She was definitely happy to be in a relationship with me and bragged to her friends about how great I was. This made me feel good, and I thought we seemed like those funny TikTok couples she looks at. She started talking about marriage, and I proposed soon after that. We were so in bliss after I proposed, we actually got pregnant before getting married. After getting married, we had 2 daughters and a nice home to live in. There was very little for me to complain about at the time. We were the typical family running around after our daughters who were 5 and 3 years old and going to work. I always treated her right, and I tried to balance being a good father and husband. She would do the same, although it was a challenge because our daughters were definitely a handful. One day, my cousin, Anthony, canceled on me because his mom was getting out of the hospital. Since it was picking her up, I decided to take my wife's car to finally get her check engine light taken care of. After walking out of the shop, I opened her glove compartment up to put the paperwork inside for later. When I opened it up, a bunch of crap fell out and I had to pick it up. While I was cleaning it up, I found a pretty recent picture of her with her ex-boyfriend, Keith. The picture surprised me because it was a picture of him locked up somewhere. In the picture with him was my wife and his sister, Nadine. This surprised me because I never heard about her visiting him while he was locked up. I didn't even know he was locked up. He got a little heavier, his dreads were longer, and he was wearing glasses he didn't need, but it was definitely him. After cleaning up the mess, I drove home with a bunch of crap on my mind. I couldn't understand why she was going to meet him while he was locked up, and why I wasn't told about this. It gave me a sinking suspicion about this, especially since it was so hard to get her to leave the love triangle situation she was in. When I got home, my wife was watching TV and went straight for the computer. I did a deep dive and found out more about the situation. Apparently, I knew I wasn't going to find anything on her social media, so I checked his sister Nadine's page. I found out he's been out for 3 years thanks to the pics. Looking further, through Nadine's friends, there were pictures of my wife with Keith and Nadine at a couple places and parties. Seeing this got me emotional, and I had to ask her about it and see what she has to say. I started up a conversation with my wife, and I casually asked, had she heard from Keith? She looked at me confused and had told me she hadn't heard from him. I couldn't believe she just lied to me in my face, and I knew I couldn't trust her anymore. When that happened, I started thinking about all the things I should have noticed that was going on. She was gone more often, she stayed up later on her phone, and she avoided romantic gestures towards me. After she lied, I started snooping for some answers. To catch her slipping, I took on more responsibility with the kids so that she might use for free time to make a mistake around me. After a few days, she slipped up and told him I was going to be taking my kids to see my parents. After hanging with my kids and my parents, I called the old lady who lived next door and asked did she see anybody come over to my house. She said she did a while ago, and it was the same car it usually was. This surprised me because even our neighbor knew Keith was coming over. Even though I didn't know everything yet, I still was mad because deep down, I knew what was up. When we got back, I asked her did she have any friends over, and she said no, and she just took a nap. This was BS, so I was really ready to leave her. That weekend, I made up an excuse to leave the house all day. I told her I was going to take my kids over to their classmate's house to play, and then I was going to see my cousin Anthony. She was fine with it, and when that Saturday came, I took the kids to the house and waited, hung out at a close restaurant. After hanging out for 3 hours, I called her and got no answer. I called one more time and she still didn't answer, and that wasn't normal for her. After that, I drove onto my street and parked at the end of it. Walking back to the house, his car was there, and I got mad but still held it together. We lived in a ranch-style house, so I couldn't go through the door because we didn't have an upstairs to sneak in. This meant I had to go into the back where our kitchen was. Going in, when I had got to the living room, I could already hear them. Apparently, they left the bedroom door open, and when I looked inside, I was destroyed by seeing him bang her on our bed. I just froze and I had to stop myself from being zoned out. After sapping back to reality, I went next door to see my neighbor, so when I confronted her, I had a real witness on everything. After knocking on the door, her son opened the door, which was actually better. He asked me how I was doing, and I asked him, could he help me with something in the house? He asked me what it was, and I said I just really needed him to keep his eye on something for me. He said okay, and to give him a while because he was tending to his kids. After that, I went back to my house and had to wait for about 15 minutes for him to come over. This is hard to do because I had to see and hear him banging my wife while holding up for him. When he finally came in, I told him to wait in the living room, and I walked in and had confronted them both. It was a real mess, and when we started all this shouting, our neighbor's son came in to see what was going on. When he came in, he thought we were going to jump him, so he hopped out the room window half-dressed, and my wife was embarrassed because she had on nothing but her socks. After shouting I want a divorce, she yelled back at me, "F you!" and we just left back to my neighbor's house. I thanked him for having my back and apologized that I didn't tell him what was going on. I told him I didn't think he would come over if I told him, and he laughed and said I was right. He said he only intended to bring his kids over to see their grandmother, not all this. When night came, I left to my cousin's house to be with him and his girlfriend. While driving there, my wife called me to curse me out. I told her I did everything for her and she disrespected me in the worst way. She had claimed it was my fault, and I tricked her into marrying me and having kids when she wanted to work it out with Keith. When she said that, I had no feelings for her. I told her since she regretted having my kids, then she doesn't have to worry about them anymore. She tried to say that's not what she meant, but I hung up on her. She can say what she wants about me. She can even say she regrets marrying me. But I won't allow her to disrespect my kids. When I got to my cousin's house, I told him everything, and him and his girlfriend never left my side, even through the divorce. I think it brought us even closer. Through the divorce, I ended up getting screwed over hard because not only did I have to pay alimony and child support, but she get the kids too. Afterwards, she called me and tried to apologize for what she had said about the kids. She said she loved her daughters and didn't regret having them, and I asked was her love the reason she destroyed her family? She said she didn't mean to do it, but everything changed when she ran into Keith's sister, Nadine. She said she ran into her while out at lunch from her job, and they started to catch up. She said she asked Nadine about Keith, and Nadine said he had got locked up. Apparently, he got stopped on a DUI. When the cops searched the car, they found marijuana on him and his friends. Plus, they found out the police was already looking for him, so he ended up getting brought in. After hearing this, my wife felt that, and Nadine asked her could she help support him while he was in jail, and she agreed. After he made parole, he reconnected with her and apologized for how he treated her, and after reconnecting, the affair started for about 2 years. I knew he meant none of it, and recently I heard I was right. A friend of mine told me he ran into a friend of hers and recognized him from hanging with me and my cousin. She asked him how I was, and he said I was good. When he asked her how my ex was, she shook her head and told him she should have just stayed with me. Apparently, he was still messing around with his son's mother, so Keith was banging them both. Hearing this just made me roll my eyes, and I changed to the subject. I tried to save her from the stupid love triangle, but she's still falling for the BS. It's clear he was always a clown, but after seeing what I saw, she liked being treated like another hoe. She just can't seem to understand he's not going to let go of his child's mother. If you hear a girl you like talk about her ex all the time, you better run for the hills. Insane Ike from the community has this to say. You have to think that your wife got what she desired, a worthless piece of garbage that will never be even close to the man you are. You will find a woman that loves you and will do right by you. Just never fall back to the ex-wife that used you. Ex-Cat Rep says, that's rough, but not necessarily surprising. Just goes to show that you can take the girl out of the neighborhood, but you can't always take the neighborhood out of the girl. Yikes, OP. You got that right. Turns out you should have taken your own advice and just left her because she's a clown. She was stupid from the beginning. She definitely didn't give herself much chance to grieve the relationship with her own ex before getting together with you. I'd say that was a red flag. She was just jumping into the next thing that could provide her some security. People like her don't like being alone and honestly can't be alone. They don't know how to function when being alone. They sort of lose themselves in the passion of a relationship. She truly is a wretched woman. To lie about it to you, to blame you, and to say that about her own kids? I'm so sorry that it ended up the way it did. You sound like an amazing father, and a smart one at that. Good thinking having a witness. I'm sorry, OP. I know she'll get what she deserves. What do you make of OP and his story? Let us know in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today on Our Space. Like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time.